Kurek. I work for Hartford Financial Group as the operations manager. And I'm excited that you guys signed up to join us for our first seminar of 2022. We have a few other seminars coming up. We have taxes and retirement next week and Social Security the week after that on January 19th. And I'm super excited to announce our speaker this morning, Nettie Owens with Sapari Solutions. She is a certified professional organizer in chronic disorganization. She is an internationally recognized and award-winning expert, author, and sought-after speaker on accountability and productivity. And she has over 17 years of experience in this field. And she specializes in coaching business owners to help them stay motivated and create a productive workspace for their employees. So welcome, Nettie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's really great to be back. I presented here at Hartford Financial Group, I want to say 4 years ago at this point.
I think so.
About that. So it's so wonderful to be back with you this morning. And I desire that our time together here be an interactive one. So if you are able, I would love for you to utilize the chat feature where it says that you can ask questions or post comments, because I love to be able to talk and interact with you. And it's not my desire to just talk at you. We can certainly have a conversation about this topic, about clutter and organization and getting organized for the new year. And the more that you contribute through questions and things like that, the more we will have that discussion. So I'm not as familiar with the GoToWebinar, but there's a panel that should allow you to type in questions, and I'll try and monitor that, and so will Diane as we're going through this presentation. So welcome to each one of you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Do I have it shared already?
Yes.
It is shared. Okay, yeah. Awesome. So I'll get started. So we're going to be talking today about clutter. We're going to be talking about organization, and we're going to be talking about these concepts as they apply to you personally, because there's really no one-size-fits-all solution to getting organized. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is that organization is not the goal for anything that we're talking about here. The goal ultimately is that you create a space that works for you. So organization is simply a tool to get there, and we're going to focus our efforts really on what that space that you're creating is, and then we'll talk about some strategies to help you get there. But keep that in mind, because sometimes, myself included, we get so fixated on the process that we forget what we're creating. So remember, just like when you're baking a cake, the end goal is that you have a delicious cake. The end goal is not that you stay in the kitchen for years baking and baking and baking, right? We want to eventually get to a point where we're just enjoying that end result. So with that in mind, we're going to move forward here. As Diane said, my focus more and more these days is on working with business owners, but I love to talk about organization, and it is at the core of everything that I do. So the concepts that we talk about, while they can apply in your home, can apply anywhere, right? Anywhere that you're thinking you could use a little bit more control over the environment or your time, or perhaps even your thoughts, and we'll talk about how all of that applies. So as I said, our end goal today is to create an environment that supports who you are, what you're doing, and where you're going, right? And typically, if we've come to this space, this conversation, there's something that's a little bit out of whack for you to say, hey, you know what? This is the year that I'm going to get organized, or this is the year that I'm going to take control of my space or my time or my clutter. So something is a little bit off, and it's likely that you're probably experiencing some of the same things that others in this room and others that I work with have experienced, which is perhaps it's taking you too much time to find what you need, or you're feeling uncomfortable about having people over. It might be that you're losing things, you're rushing around, you might be missing deadlines, or it's just that you just don't feel great in the space that you have, and that's okay. You know, there's no fault, there's no blame here. It's just the situation that you're currently in, and we're going to talk about a path to move forward from that space. So let's move forward here. There we go. Juggling lots of things, lots going on. And I want to just make a comment here too. Before the pandemic, things were challenging and it was difficult, you know, at times to get your space and your time organized. Since the pandemic has happened, it's almost more so. And I see a couple reasons for this. For one, we are in our spaces a lot, like more than not, right? So even if you're, if you're retired, you might have already been spending a good amount of time in your space, but likely if you're anything like the other retired people that I know, you were out and about, you were involved in traveling, visiting friends, volunteer activities. Maybe you'd gone back for consulting, but you had a lot of things that took you out of your home. And now with the pandemic, and certainly with the second wave or fourth wave, God, what wave are we on? I've forgotten. It's kind of become a little bit of a blur, right? We're back, you know, kind of sticking around our homes more. And so in the past, you might have gotten something organized and it would stay that way because you weren't in that space all the time using that space quite as much as we are. But like I said, the pandemic has really compounded this problem. So I want you to give yourself some grace here. It is so normal that there be a level of use, like a normal level of use in your house, and it's going to be a little more difficult to feel like you get to a done spot. The other thing that I've seen with the pandemic that's kind of new than the way things were in the past is decision making is harder now. And when we talk about organization, we're really talking about making decisions about the stuff around you. And at this point where we are, decision making is harder for a number of reasons. For right now, there are a lot of people who are sick, and when you're ill, decision making is an area of your mental processes that's impacted. You don't feel like making decisions because decision making is a brain and energy intensive kind of a thing. So it can be harder from that standpoint. But when there's so much uncertainty around us, we kind of start embodying that and we feel like it's difficult to make decisions. We not only feel like it's making it difficult, it just is, right? So we don't know, are we going to be traveling? Will our flights be canceled? Will we be at church, or will we be doing that virtually? We'll make these plans, but then they have to shift. And so decision making is just a difficult thing. There's so much to incorporate into our decision making process, and it's going to impact our ability to get and stay organized. So again, just this reminder to remember ultimately what you're doing is creating a space that feels good to you, and there are factors outside of your control that everyone is experiencing that will make this process more difficult than it was before the pandemic. So I think we can all just like give ourselves a mutual sort of hug and pat on the back. We've made it this far, and it's still going to be challenging, but we're going to get through it together. All right, so we've talked a little bit about where things are right now, and there are so many different places that you could get your information about how to get and stay organized, how to let go of clutter, how to simplify. Being a little bit more outside of the organizing community, I haven't heard quite as much about Marie Kondo as I did when I came a few years back. But she's had her TV shows and and multiple books going out about organization, clutter, tidying up, letting go, sparking joy, all of those things. there's magazines, there's courses you could take. So really, what do you do? Like, which of these resources do you listen to? I will be honest, all of them have great strategies for getting and staying organized, but you're looking for the strategies that work for you. So just like if we go back to that cake analogy, once you get familiar with the cake and the baking process, you might make some tweaks. Like, you'll know that your oven is a little bit hotter than most, and so you make some adjustments to that. You know that your family doesn't like vanilla, but you like almond extract, so you might change that out a little bit. So we're going to take that basic recipe and you're going to make that your own. And so likewise, you might see these resources and they might spark some ideas, but you're going to weigh that against what you're creating and say, does this really work for me? Is this going to work for me based on what I'm creating, how I operate, how I think, the people around me? So I'm not saying don't check these out. I'm saying check them out with the idea of being like a scientist, kind of gathering information and ideas, a researcher, and knowing that there's not going to be a one size fits all, one solution to the challenges that you're facing. So this is what we're going for, right? We're going for this kind of relaxed feeling in the space that you are creating. And you can definitely get there. However, it's not going to be by doing the same things that you've currently been doing. We're going to have to make some changes to the way that you've been operating. And maybe it's not even so much the way that you've been operating, but the way that you've been thinking about the process that you have in front of you. So I want you to imagine for just a moment that, you know, say, I just read this again and I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm going to say this sentence and you're all going to be like, no, because no one's coming over to my house right now. I was about to say, imagine for a moment that your sister calls and says she's coming into town tomorrow. And then you're probably thinking, but did she get her COVID test and is she vaccinated, right? So we'll say all of that's done. And someone's just dropping by to your house and they want to stay with you, and the butterflies that you have in your stomach aren't dread about what they're going to see when they walk in the door, but excitement to show off your space, to welcome them into your warm and inviting home. You do just a quick little pick up and tidy and vacuum and you're good to go. There's no like, you know, fear and chaos of, you know, what she's going to walk into. Imagine that you're on time with paying your bills, you're no longer paying late fees, and you're literally saving hundreds of dollars a month because that's taken care of. Imagine that you've pared down to just the things that you love and use around you, and you're able to let go of the storage unit that you have. You can park your car in the garage. Yes, oh my gosh, that's a favorite, right? And you're saving money in insurance because, by the way, the insurance company loves when you park your car in the garage. And, you know, certainly not paying for that storage unit is helpful. And your home feels comfortable to you that you've freed enough time to continue to volunteer, pursue a hobby, guilt-free, because all of the basics are covered, right? That's what we're going for. But as I said, we're going to be looking at changing the way that you're thinking and acting currently. And change takes time, I get that, but right now it may be the case that you're not quite sure where that clutter is coming from. You're not necessarily sure where to start. That's a big one that affects just about everybody that I talk to. Perhaps you've written some goals before, but you haven't followed through on them. And it feels like making this vision a reality is just not going to happen anytime soon. You're not necessarily setting time aside to handle the stuff that's in front of you, and maybe you're not actually sure how to organize the things in a way that would feel good. You're not necessarily sure what's in the way. And for all the times that you've tried something new, even if you came to this presentation a few years ago, it's hard because the shine of doing something new wears off and you're stuck with having to do it on a continual basis, and those habits and routines are really hard to create and stick to. So, as I said, there's a lot of factors that are playing into why you have or have not been able to get and stay organized in the past. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a failure as a person, a mom, dad, human being, professional, homekeeper, time manager. It's just that you're looking for the right tools that are going to work for you. So there's a different path that you can follow, and we're going to talk about this. And I just need your buy-in. So I'm going to look and see here. We've got a question. Yes, absolutely, Linda. There's definitely more motivation when someone's coming over. I feel that too. I just want that motivation to be excitement versus dread, right? So when we get into that, like, oh, I'm excited, I'm going to do this, awesome. But when we're in the, oh my gosh, like, don't knock on that door because I'm not ready for you to walk in, that's what we want to avoid, okay? All right, so we're going to go through 10 different steps today and create this new path, a new way of doing things. Each of the steps here is that they're not of, let me see how to say this best. You're going to look at all of them. We're going to learn all of them, and you'll find that you go back to some of them. So you might start with number 1 and we go to number 2 and then we go back to number 1. And then we're like, okay, now I need to jump to number 5, and that's okay. But I'm going to go through each of them. I actually have a handout that you might be taking some notes on, notepad or paper or whatever. I can drop that link. I don't know if that's a possibility. Can I share a link in here? I'll share it with Diane. You can.
Okay, and I can email everyone afterwards with the link as well, Nettie.
Okay, so I'm going to send this to Diane really quickly because it will take me 2 shakes to do so. Thank you, technology. And then you'll have it if you would like it. Sorry for not putting that in there earlier. Okay, and that will just help you. It has these steps written down on it, and that way you can follow along and take some notes on each one. So the first step, and we'll just go through really quickly, and then I'm going to dig into them a little bit deeper, is identify your stumbling blocks. We got to know what we're facing to begin with. Number 2 is identify the source. Number 3 is to define your goal. Number 4, decide where to begin. Number 5 is to set amazing goals, learn how to set amazing goals. And number 6 is to let go. And now number 7 is to get organized. And I just want to highlight that. So often in this process, we're like, I'm going to get organized. And we go out and we buy a bunch of plastic bins, or, just really dig into the process right away without having a great plan. And that doesn't often yield phenomenal lasting results. So notice that we don't get to the getting organized step until step 7. And there's a good reason, and we'll go over, what those reasons are. Number 8 is to address bigger issues. Like I said, there can be other compounding issues to why you're having trouble getting and staying organized. So it's important to figure out what those are and deal with them. Number 9 is to make big changes with little steps. And number 10 is to create habits, routines, and other ways of making it work. So just want to note here, if you've tried to get organized in the past and you've gone through the whole process and you cleaned out the living room and it was so glorious and you loved it, but then it didn't stick, the challenge wasn't in the organizing. The challenge was in the habits that were or were not created along the way or after to help it stay organized, right? So some of you may say, I'm great at getting organized. It's the staying organized that I have a challenge with. So we'll talk about that as well. All right, so let's dig into each one of these. And any questions so far, feel free to drop a note into the questions section. And if everyone's doing all right and feeling pretty good about what you're hearing so far, then type type I've got it, right, in the answer section, right? That will help me know that you're picking up what I'm putting down, and we'll be ready to move forward. I'm going to take a drink while we do that. Awesome, awesome. Thank you. I see them popping through. That's super helpful for me. Perfect. All right, let's go then. Number one is to identify those stumbling blocks. So the biggest stumbling block that I've seen is what we're going to call clutter, right? And I'm putting quotes around it because clutter is different for every single person. And what we're going to do today is identify what clutter is for you, right? So I consider clutter to fall in 3 different categories. First type of clutter, and you're all very familiar with it, is just physical clutter. It's the tangible stuff that that exists in the space around you. It could be this mug. This mug could be clutter. It could be if I have 10 mugs and they don't fit into the cabinet where I would want to store them, then that could be clutter, right? Clutter is well, let's look over the last 2 categories before I tell you what clutter is. Number 2 is time clutter. So you may have a very full schedule or a schedule of activities that aren't necessarily working to support your ultimate goals. That can be clutter. And the last kind of clutter is mental clutter. So this kind of clutter is like stress, unhelpful beliefs, it's perhaps even relationships that are troubling to you. All of those kinds of things go into the mental clutter. So they're not tangible, they're more along the lines of your thoughts and beliefs and your relationships patterns, that kind of thing. So keeping that in mind, I want you to take a moment and think about, where do you feel the clutter is showing up most for you? Is it physical, time, or mental? And if you want to put that into the chat box, that would be great. And that will, I want you to kind of think about how that's playing out for you, right? Because we're going to look through what we're talking about with that lens of, where that clutter is coming from. Barbara Hemphill, back in the 70s, said, clutter is unmade decisions. And I have yet to find a better descriptor of clutter than that. Because as I said, clutter is unique to you. And clutter is that stuff around you that doesn't really feel or fit into the vision that you'd like for your space. And so it really is an unmade choice, an unmade decision. And as I said at the beginning of this presentation, right now we're having an even harder time making decisions. So there may be more clutter around you now than there had been in the past. Thank you for those of you who have dropped in the kinds of clutter. I'm seeing mostly physical, but definitely some time and all 3 certainly, and some mental, being busy, that kind of thing, is definitely something in the clutter category. Clutter, no matter where you start working on it. So this is the good news. If, for instance, you said that your challenge with clutter was time, even if you start working on your physical clutter, it'll start impacting your time and your mental clutter. And if you start working on your mental clutter, you'll see an improvement in your time and your physical clutter. If you work on your time clutter, again, you'll see an impact in the other 2 areas. They're all very interrelated, so it's possible, once you start working in an area, that you see an improvement across all 3. So no worries, by the way, on taking your time to find the chat. I'm so glad you're engaged with us, and we're all learning new technology as we interact with each other. Diane didn't mention this, but I'm coming in from Pittsburgh. Sorry, I know I'm not a Steelers fan. I'm not a Ravens fan. I'm agnostic. I don't do football, so I hope you'll still listen to me. And technology is allowing this presentation to happen. So, okay. So first we need to identify what is going on in your time, your physical space, your mental space, that you are experiencing clutter in these areas. Kathy Waddell, another professional organizer, said, talked about looking at your space with new lenses. So I wear glasses, but you know, the first time when I put these glasses on, right, I see a clearer picture of what's going on. And I want you to imagine you're putting on a set of glasses and you're looking at your space with new eyes, with a new perspective that's clearer, and see it for the first time. So if you said that physical clutter was a challenge, go to or imagine the place where most of that physical clutter is happening. If you said that time clutter is a challenge, I want you to just pause and either look at your calendar or imagine your calendar. And if you said that mental clutter was a challenge, I want you to pause for a second and think about, you know, all the thoughts and things that happen to be floating around in your mind. And I want you to look at them, all these spaces, with new eyes. What's actually happening here? What clutter actually exists here? What's working in that space and what's not working in that space for you? Because so often we just get used to our physical time and mental spaces because it's a normal brain process, right? Our brain says, oh, we've seen that before, it's not new, and so I don't need to pay attention to it. So we can literally have a treadmill sitting in the kitchen with a pile of clothes and a toaster on top and not notice it. Not because there's anything wrong with us, but because that's a natural process that your brain says, yeah, I've got it. The treadmill's there. I don't have to remember. I've like filed it away. It's right there. And the clothes go there and I know they're all there. So even though it might not be an ideal situation, it's still not going to raise any alarm bells. But I want you to see that now for the first time and maybe take some notes on your paper about, you know, what is going on here? What kinds of clutter are you seeing in that space? What's working about it and what's not working about it? And again, that last question, the what's working or set of questions and not working, is important because we often throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, everything's terrible. It's not. There probably is something working. Maybe you put that treadmill in the kitchen because you were going to ride it for a few minutes in the morning before starting breakfast. There might have been a reason behind it, right? So what is working about that and what's not working about it? Or maybe what's working is that you really needed a place to hang clothes. So maybe it's not ideal that it's the treadmill, but you could swap the treadmill out for a clothes rack from Target for $10, and there you go, problem solved, right? So identify what is working, and that way you can solve that particular challenge.
All right. And Nettie, just to let you know, I was able to add that handout, everyone. If you look on the right side, you have something called handouts. And if you click on it, it will pull up a new Chrome or Internet Explorer page, and you can print that handout out. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Diane. And thank you for letting us know it's in there. Awesome. Okay. So that first process is to just notice, to just pay attention to what is getting in the way. What are you stumbling on? If the path isn't clear for you right now, why isn't it clear? What is working? What's not working? And then we're going to look at where it's coming from. Being really ruthless in this particular question. Where is that clutter coming from? This is a really good time, even if your clutter isn't mental, to also examine some unhelpful beliefs that you might have around the situation. And I'm going to name a couple of them that you might recognize for yourself. So if you do, it's okay, just kind of jot that down. Unhelpful beliefs, one is usefulness. You believe that thing could be useful to yourself or someone else someday, and so you're holding on to it. Not a bad belief in general, but in our situation, if you have a lot of things around you, sometimes usefulness can be an unhelpful belief. Perfectionism, huge. Oftentimes, people who I see are having challenge with organization have that challenge because of wanting to do it the right way, and so that's a stumbling block to them actually getting organized. Responsibility, that it's your responsibility to take care of these things that you have in your space. Attachment, that means that you feel some connection to, and sometimes this leads into the next one, which is identity. An example of this might be you were a teacher or an educator previously, or you currently are now, and getting rid of those teaching materials will change your identity. And so that can be a challenge. Memory, we all have this. You know, you associate that thing. Here we go. I'll show you what's on my desk right now. You'll go, why do you have that on your desk? This is an acorn. Oh, there we go. Right? I have an acorn on my desk, right? Somebody might say that's clutter. I don't. It represents a memory, but I don't have lots of acorns. There's not tons of stuff. I can see this acorn in it, and it represents a time, and it reminds me of something I want to remember, and that's fine. It's when that attachment and that memory and all of that become excessive, right? Control. I'm not changing this because someone else told me to, and I'm in control of my space, right? So we have those. So no, there's no judgment here. Just notice, right? That's all we're doing. Notice if some of these things might be unhelpful beliefs that are getting in the way. And for the others, it's just looking at, you know, where is the stuff coming from? Are you buying it? Is it being gifted to you? Are you salvaging it? Is it just here because it's always been here, but it's because you inherited the house or the space from somebody else and it's just never been dealt with? Look at where it's coming from. Typically, the sources are limited. There's not 100 different ways that clutter comes into your space. There's a finite number. Figure out what those are. And the last thing is if it's time clutter, then take some time to do a time study. I can talk to you more one-on-one if you'd like more information on how to do this, but the basics are that you take a week and you just look at how you're spending your time over that week. So you can see, you know, what are your commitments, what are your activities, what things are coming up unexpected that you're saying yes to, all of that. And then our next step is to define your goal. So we talk about goals in step 5, but here, this particular step is looking at what are you creating? Are you creating a home that feels calm and inviting? Are you creating an office space that feels efficient and professional? Are you creating a schedule that reflects your role and your identity? Like, what are you creating? So in this exercise, I would encourage you to answer what organized means to you. Like, define that word for yourself. You have a belief around that word, so taking some time to define it, and then why do you want to get organized? Like, what is your motivation behind you taking this action? And then the last thing I want you to do is I want you to imagine your space, your time, yourself as this organized person, and I want you to describe it, like in its full glory. The whole thing is done. It's exactly as you want it to be. And what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? How does it sound? What kinds of things happen there? Who are you? I want you to think about this future when it's done and talk to me about what that looks and feels like. So that is a journaling exercise, and it'll take some time for you to do that, but it's super, super helpful. Amazing research that came out recently said that one of the reasons why we procrastinate, which that could be in another like 3-day workshop, but why we procrastinate is because we don't connect with our future self. We see our future self in the same way that we see a stranger. So it really doesn't matter if we eat another box of cookies today because we have no connection to the person that it's going to affect. Like right now, we feel good about that, but we're not thinking about how it's harming that future self of ours. So the more we imagine our future self, our future life, our future identity, the more they are no longer a stranger, they become a friend, and we are less likely to procrastinate, significantly less likely to procrastinate. So a fun little exercise that can actually, shift everything that we're talking about really quickly is just imagining your future self, the future self that is the one that you want to be. Okay. All right. And then we get to decide where to begin. And there's no right answer. I'm sorry, spoiler alert. There's no right answer to where to begin. But as I said, anywhere that you start is going to affect the other places. Some great places to begin, if you're talking about, for instance, the whole house, then your bedroom is a great place to begin because, again, research is showing just how important sleep is. And the more you have an environment where you can feel good and get that, solid sleep, the better you will be able to make decisions, which we said organization's about decisions, and help yourself manage the rest of the project ahead. So your bedroom can be a phenomenal place to start. Likewise, you might want to start in a living space, a space that public will see, because being able to get that immediate feedback like, wow, your space looks amazing, can help fuel you and motivate you to work on the other spaces. So that's another place that you could start and get good results right away. A third place you might consider is the kitchen. Again, just like sleep, we know how important nutrition is, and being able to organize the kitchen means that you might be able to improve your eating and therefore save money, improve relationships because you're having meals together, and your whole well-being of taking in good, healthy food, right? So that can be a great place to start. And the last place that I would recommend if we're talking about the whole house is actually any storage unit. Your storage unit, your attic, your garage, you clear out those spaces, and the stuff that's kind of around you and in your space now has a place to go, and you can get it out of just your normal running into everything all the time space. I like to talk about three layers that we have when we're for any kind of object, activity, or thought. And the first layer is the layer that's closest to us. And the stuff that's in this particular layer are the things that we use all the time on a daily basis. The next layer around us, I call it kind of the reference layer, and it's the stuff that we use periodically. So it might be, we just had holidays, so it might be holiday decorations. It could be a phone book, if you still have one. It could be, books that you reference. It could be tools that you might use periodically. They're just not used all the time. They're just used on an occasional basis. And then the last layer around you is really the storage layer. And that's the stuff that you have to keep. So it could be like back taxes. It could be, you might consider those holiday decorations, since you only bring them out once a year, to be in this storage layer. And the problem that I see often is that we have our layers like all mixed up. And so we've got stuff around us, like within reach, very close at hand, that we only use once in a while. And the stuff that we use all the time is hidden behind, the 7 years of taxes that we need to save, right? So think about those layers and how once you start getting organized, you're going to be thinking about keeping those layers in order. The stuff you use the most, the stuff you use sometimes, but not all the time, and the stuff you rarely use. So one place to begin is to just start, like I said, if we're clearing out a storage space, that's going to be giving us the ability to put those layers back in order. All right, for you, I want you to go back to that visualization. So this is going to be after our presentation here, when you do some journaling and you've started visualizing. I am guessing that many of you will have clarity on where to start just after thinking about what you're creating, because you'll see this finished product and you'll be able to go, okay, wow, if if ultimately what I'm creating is a schedule that I don't feel harried in, and in this perfect imagination of mine, I'm volunteering once a week, and I'm going into the office twice a week, and however that looks for you, then it's going to become clear as far as where to begin that process. It's going to be like the big kind of, you'll see sort of flashing lights around the stuff that's most important to you, and you'll go, okay, all right, you know what? I realize I'm only volunteering once a week. That means that 5 other volunteer activities that I have are probably where I want to start my process of organization and letting go. All right, any questions? We're about to move into step 5. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat. If you don't have any questions, I want you to type the one aha that you've had so far. And I will take another drink while you do that. And while you're typing, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, and we'll pick up some of those ahas as we go forward. Ooh, excellent. Connecting to future self, guilt for the throwaway society. Yep, absolutely. Mental focus isn't just there. Yep, I get it. Oh wait, I think those were some of the layers. Okay, cool. Everybody can see these, right? So just I want to make a note about the aha that I'm reading right now. So many of us live with other people, and I'm going to talk about this again, but I might not get back to it given our timeline for today. So I just want to point this out. When we are living in community, right? We have families, friends, roommates that we're living with. We cannot organize someone else. So there was a comment here to sit down and have a talk with the partner, and that's so good. This is something that you want to get on the same page with. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because your vision for what you're creating might be completely different from what they're creating. And there is a way to work together, because you can then express and say, you know what, this is really important to me. Like, creating a space that feels like this is really important to me. And this other person would say, you know what, creating that space just isn't important to me at all. But what's really important to me is that we have time to travel. And so I really want to make sure that what we're doing here doesn't cut into our time to travel. And then you can have a dialogue and conversation around it, versus just saying, I'm doing this and they're not getting on board and they don't seem to be helping. So it's so important to open those lines of communication. Equally important when we get to the letting go stage is that you cannot make decisions about someone else's stuff. I can tell you the fastest way to ruin an organizing project is to throw out somebody else's things, because if you do not, and you're living in a communal space, you don't have the trust of others living around you, then you're dead in the water. Like, that's it. That's going to end it, and they won't have buy-in. You won't have their buy-in to do anything going forward. So I would encourage you to start with a conversation, sharing each of your vision for what you're creating, and then find the places that you have some mutual ground. And that other person, especially if they love and care about you, is going to say, I don't want them to be unhappy, so I can give a little here. I could give them a little bit of time to work on this here, or I could perhaps be more cognizant of picking up my socks and putting them in the hamper. And you might say, you know what, I'm going to let them have this whole space where they can do their thing and be cluttered and disorganized, but I want to prioritize the living room. You can have those compromises, but only if you're both communicating what you truly want. Okay. So going on to setting amazing goals. There's a phenomenal book out there called Creating Your Best Life. It's by Carolyn Adams Miller. She talks about bucket lists and creating the vision for your life. And it has the best description of goal setting and goal creation that I've read in all my years of doing this. Chapter 5 describes exactly how to do it. But we're going to break it down a little bit. We're going to talk about SMART goals here. So if you're familiar with the SMART goal, did I write it down? I did not write it down. Acronym, you want a goal that's specific. So you're very clear about the thing that you're working on, that it's measurable, right? So we're not going to say, hey, I'm going to lose weight, right? You're going to say, I'm going to lose 5 pounds, right? It's going to be measurable and clear on that. It is attainable. So this is something that you have to think about in relation to the other aspects of the goal that you're setting, but losing 5 pounds in one day is not a reasonable, attainable goal. However, losing that weight over 2 months is doable, right? So thinking about that. And then we have realistic, which plays into what I just shared with you. And let's see, time sensitive. So again, having that time bound part on it makes it so that it basically writes the formula for the thing that you're creating. So SMART allows you to write a goal that has a formula for success. And I had said measurable. So you might say something like, I'm going back to this lose weight thing because everybody seems to be able to wrap their brain around it. But if you're losing 5 pounds in 2 months, then you might be losing about just about half a pound a week, right? And so you're making it very specific, you're making it very measurable, it's time bound, and it's realistic and attainable. So think about that in relation to that big vision that you were just creating about what you want to achieve, and consider writing 3 goals. I would start, these can be overall goals, like I'm going to get my house organized this year. That could be a specific time-bound goal, although I would say getting your house organized is kind of like saying I'm going to lose weight, right? It's not as specific as we could be. So when we tie in that vision, so I'm going to create a house that feels company ready, or that would be more specific, right? And consider writing 3 goals, perhaps one that's more global, and 2 others that you might consider sub goals, to break that down even further. Okay, and then our next step, I think I went forward too far. Yep, somehow, hold on a second. I do not know how to get back. There we go. Okay, so then the next step is to let go. If you've read or seen anything on Marie Kondo's The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, letting go is a huge part of her process, and it makes a lot of sense from the perspective of when you take time to let go of the excess that's in your life, your space, your schedule, you have more time to do the other things, to work on the project, and you organize what's left. Marla Seeley, the fly lady, some of you might be familiar with her. She was someone who was really popular in this space about, I'm gonna say maybe 18 to 20 years ago, but her concepts are still valid, and she says you can't organize clutter. So the first thing you do is just let go of the excess stuff that's around you. However, the letting go stage can be where a lot of people get tripped up because of those things that we talked about before, that responsibility and usefulness and attachment and perfectionism, things that might be coming up. So the first rule is to think about the 80-20 rule, the Pareto's principle, which was first applied in economics, that applies here too. And it says that we use, or we get 80% of our results from 20% of our inputs. So if we apply that here in what we're talking about, really focusing on 20% of our stuff is the stuff that we use on a daily basis, and it gives us, you know, the 80% of the activity that we do on a day-to-day basis. So if we use that rule, then you would be able to perhaps go to your bookshelf, and for every 5 books, you're going to keep 1 and throw away 4. Now, if everybody just had like a minor panic attack when I said that, it's okay. I'm not going to invite you to be that drastic. I just want you to go through that thought process. Like, there's so much around you on a regular basis that you don't use. And so being really critical and going, okay, I'm creating a space that feels calm and inviting. So in that space, what fits and what doesn't? A warning here is when we get stuck on the I'm letting go, or I'm focusing on the discarding process, it can take on a life of its own and feel like you never get to the end of it. So you just want to get to the point where you're lightening the load. And the best way that I've found to do this is to work on it just a little bit at a time. You know, 15 to 30 minutes a day, or 10 minutes a day if that amount is too much, or even 1 minute a day. It can be as simple as letting go of one thing a day. Imagine if you did that. You'd actually let go of 365 things by the end of the year. I used to run a clutter challenge periodically, where every day we'd let go of the number of things that date identified. So on day 1, we'd let go of 1 thing, and on day 2, we'd let go of 2 things, and it was a great process. You can sort of start working this muscle just by looking for the easy stuff. We don't have to confront the hard stuff right away. We can start with the easy stuff, like the stuff that's recycling or trash or donation already, that we already know about, and start kind of working that muscle, and then get into the things that are going to be a little bit harder to confront, like an armoire that was in your family for years that nobody wants anymore, right? That's going to be a little bit more difficult. So give yourself the ability to kind of work that muscle of letting go, and then confront the bigger thing. The other benefit of that, as you are thinking about letting go of something, you actually start the process of distancing yourself from it. So just that thought, like, hey, in 3 months, I'm going to be letting go of that armoire. Within 3 months, that's my plan, is to let go of the armoire. And so you start thinking about what life would be like without the armoire, and who you might give it to, or how you might let go of it. And so it allows you to kind of start building some distance from that. Again, it's that future self exercise. Like, you're going to see yourself as the person in the future who doesn't have the armoire. And what will you do today to become that person in the future that doesn't have the armoire? So again, just, you know, starting with small stuff, starting with the easy stuff, and letting go a little bit at a time. Next is the fun part that we've just all been waiting for, right? The getting organized part. By this point, you're left with the stuff that you use around you all the time. Actually, I'm going to pause here a second. Say, for instance, back, you know, a couple steps, we picked where we wanted to get started, and we decided we were going to get started organizing in the bedroom, right? As I said, that's a good place to get started. I would encourage you to work in this particular one area until you get it to what you desire as completed. Because if you put your efforts into a number of different spaces at once, there's going to be a feeling of overwhelm. Like, it's pretty much impossible not to have that feeling of overwhelm, because what you'll see is a lot of effort being put in, and you won't physically, visibly see the results. So I encourage you to stick to one spot as you start this process, until you get it to, you know, where you feel comfortable moving on to the next spot. And then as far, yeah.
A few questions came up. Can you repeat the book title and author that you mentioned with Creating Your Best Life?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put it right in the chat.
And then one other question we had is, if you have a list of goals, is it better to start with short-term goals or long-term goals?
I'm trying to put this in the chat, but it doesn't seem to be working. So
I can put it in there if you want to.
yeah, it's Creating Your Best Life, and the author is Caroline Adams Miller.
Assuming Miller with 2 L's.
Oh, I think it just worked.
Okay, great. And then is it better to do short-term goals or to start with your long-term goals? Was the other question.
Oh, yes, excellent. Okay, so your long-term goals guide your short-term goals. That's why we start by envisioning what we're creating at the end. And then, we can think about what that global goal is. When we start just by saying, okay, in 5 years I want to be here, then we need to make a closer goal. So if in 5 years you want to be here, then by the end of this month, where do you need to be in order to reach that 5-year goal? And I don't typically quote Tony Robbins because I don't. I don't tend to align very much with his teaching. But one thing that he says that I have always really held on to is that we underestimate what we can do in a lifetime or 10 years, and we overestimate what we can do in a year. So by first looking at what you're creating into the future and then walking it backwards and saying, okay, in 5 years I want to be here. So in 4 years, I would need to have this much done. And in 3 years, I would need to have this much done. And in 2 years, I would need to have this much done. That exercise will help you actually get to being successful. You'll see then that, okay, it's something that's doable and I can break it down. And I only need to have this piece done by the next 30 days. If we instead go the other direction and we're like, in 30 days, I'm going to have this whole house organized and we're going on a cruise. Like, it's not going to get done because we've overestimated what we could accomplish in that time. But I have found that by working backwards, you remove those kinds of thinking barriers and you're able to actually come up with goals that are really effective. And anybody, I'll be sharing my information in, it is almost the top of the hour. So I'll share my information in just a moment here. And if you have any questions or you want to reach out, feel free to do so. I'm happy to answer any questions or even talk to you for a few minutes about your particular situation to give you some tips and pointers. Because normally, if we were in person, we'd just stick after in the room for a few minutes and you tell me what's going on and I, make some recommendations. So thank you for those questions, and hopefully we can maybe save some of the questions so I could perhaps follow up with a few folks if there's something specific you want to talk about. So getting organized, I said before that there are 3 layers that we want to consider. So just use that as your mental model. Like, getting organized is first of all about making decisions, and second of all about making sure that we have those layers in the right order, because then we will have the things around us that are going to help us create that phenomenal vision, and we won't be kind of tripping over the things that we're not using as frequently and so on. There are 3 steps. Number 1, which you did just a minute ago, is letting go of the excess, right? So we start with letting go. Number 2 is to group like things together. That's that organization, those like books neatly organized on the shelf. It drives me nuts. My daughter likes this, and I've always complained about it, but you'll see beautiful pictures with books organized by color. I can't even imagine that. Like, I never thought, oh yeah, I'm going to go to this book because it's blue. I'm going to the book because it has the information I need. So I'd rather it was organized by topic or author or something like that, but it's okay. If you organize by clutter, I'm not shaming you here. I'm just saying, whatever grouping makes sense to you, group like items together. And then the last one is assign them a home. So these are the 3 pieces to getting organized. Let go of the excess, group like items together, and whatever grouping you now have, you're going to assign that a home. Okay, so we're next going to look at bigger issues, and we've all seen the TV shows, I'm sure by this point, have been prevalent enough in our society, but there could be other things going on. So while you may be sitting here going, oh, I've tried all these things, it's really impacting my daily living, I don't feel like it's going to change going forward, then what you might be experiencing could be beyond just kind of the normal challenges in getting and staying organized. And in my profession, we call that chronic disorganization. It's not a diagnosis, it's just a way to identify those three things that I just shared, that the clutter you're experiencing or the situation is something that's existed for a long time. You've tried other ways to manage it, it's impacting your daily living, and you don't see a change coming in the future. Then you may be experiencing chronic disorganization. And that could be from hoarding, ADHD, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, depression, global pandemic. There's a lot, that could be impacting it. So if you're feeling like I've tried all this stuff and it's just not sticking for me, then I encourage you to reach out for a little bit of help and maybe explore why. Because there are so many resources once you understand why it's challenging for you to get and stay organized that are available, and you will no longer see it as this character flaw, which I see a lot, like I should be able to do this, other people can do this, why can't I get and stay organized? Then identifying that root source is going to make this whole process so much easier. All of that being said, I could not diagnose that. Everything that I listed is actually a medical condition in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that doctors use to help people who have these kinds of concerns. So, this situation could be bigger. And for at least 15% of those of you who are in this room, and probably more, there's something more going on. And it's okay to explore and to also get resources to help you with that. The next step is to make big changes by taking small steps. So I said, you could work for 15 to 30 minutes. Maybe it's just as simple as thinking about the future that you're creating. Take 7 seconds and imagine the future that you're creating. And tomorrow, take 14 seconds to do that. And then the next day, maybe you find a candle that smells like the house that you would love to have, the space that you would love to have. And so you buy that candle and you light it. And then the next day, the small step that you take is to clear out the top of a table where you could set that candle. So it's really just taking these incremental small steps that is going to create lasting change and not the big overhaul. I mean, we see the TV shows like I mentioned, and you're like, oh my gosh, 3 days and I could have this all changed. That is not sustainable, and it's very emotionally overwhelming, and it's physically taxing. And if you're in Maryland, right? So you pull all the stuff out of your house, I guarantee it's going to rain or snow, right? So that's just not an option. So we're going to make these small steps, and you will see big progress faster because you won't get burned out, and you will be also creating habits along the way. And that's our last step, is to create habits, because habits start first with a change in identity. So the first habit that you're going to create, the first change you're going to make, is to identify yourself and the space as the kind of person who has an organized schedule, who has a schedule that feels good to them, who has a life that feels good, a space that feels good. So first you're changing your identity, and then you're taking the small steps to move towards that identity. A book that I love on this particular topic is called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I'm typing this in. Charles Duhigg. New York Times, no. Yes, I think he's the one that's a New York Times like editorial researcher. I'm probably saying all of that wrong, but the book is great. Well-researched, well written, easy to follow. It's a really good book. So if you do everything that we talked about, but you don't change your habits, you're going to be back to square one. So for some of you, you're great at letting go, you're great at getting organized, but you're having trouble making it stick. This is where you want to focus your efforts. For others, you're great at creating habits, but you've just got too much stuff around you. Well, that's when we're going to focus on letting go. And for others, you've struggled with the actual organization part of it, and so we're going to put your effort in that organizing part. You just look at the challenges that you have in your particular situation and address that. You don't have to address all of it. It can be, it's picking out the areas that you can work on and recognizing that there are things that you already do well. So one thing that I want to encourage you with the creating habits and routines is to start thinking about routines. They are the recipe, right? They're the step-by-step recipe. You already have a lot of routines that you just naturally do. That's how we operate. We're human beings. So most of our day is decisions that our brain runs on autopilot. So think about those routines that you already have and just insert one action into an existing routine. So for instance, an existing routine, you get up in the morning, you turn on the coffee pot, and then you go brush your teeth. I don't know. That's not my routine because I don't drink coffee. So I'm hoping that's somebody's routine here. And so what you're going to do instead is you get up, you turn on the coffee pot, you throw away a piece of paper, and then you go brush your teeth. You're just inserting right into that routine something small that's going to help make big changes over time. Routines are pre-made decisions. So we talked about organizing being decision making. A routine is just deciding ahead of time that decision, and then your brain loves to follow on autopilot. So once you do that, then it's really easy for you to be successful because you just turn in, it gets incorporated basically into that autopilot setting, and you're going to be successful over time. So I know we had said 1 hour for this. We're already almost 10 minutes over, and I'm so sorry. I love talking about this, and I get excited to hear your comments and your questions and suggestions and ahas and all of that. So I want to honor your time. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm going to put up some on this slide, some places where you can get some support. First of all, challengingdisorganization.org is a wealth of information. It might help you answer that question of, is this normal or is this something bigger? Great stuff there, and can help you find a resource in your area, someone that might be able to help you in your physical space. The next recommendation I have is for a guy by the name of Andrew Mellon. He is noted as the most organized guy in America. I love his methodology, and we're great friends. He works like I work as far as everything that we've talked about is very much in line with how he does things. And coming up very soon, he has a De-Stress Your Mess Challenge, totally free, all on Facebook. The link is there, andrewmellon.com/stress-mess-challenge. And so I would encourage you, it's a fun way to do it with a community. And like I said, his resources are fantastic. So highly recommend what he puts out. And then the last resource that I would like to share with you is I have a book that outlines all 10 of these steps. It's like a workbook style that you work through each thing. If you'd like to grab a copy of that book, you may. If you go to takecontrolsystem.com, it'll take you right to ordering the book. And then my email address, I'm going to just drop it right in here. If you'd like to reach out to me one-on-one, that's fine. The reason I'm sharing these resources is because I do not work one-on-one with residential organizing clients any longer, but I want to make sure that you're positioned to make the change that you desire. So these are all tools and resources that you can tap into. My email is now in the chat for you to access if you'd like to ask me a question, or if you'd like a copy of something, you want a copy of the slides, whatever, I'm happy to send all of that along. And if you are a business owner, which I know some of you are, then I would like to share this resource with you, which takes a lot of these organizing concepts and ideas, and we apply them in the business world. All you have to do to get this one is to text the word freedom, FREEDOM, helps to spell correctly, to the number 411321, and I will send you a short book that I've written called How to Succeed in Business, the Proven Path to Business Success for High Achievers. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton back over to Diane. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Nettie, thank you so much. I know I was taking notes myself today. I'm always looking to keep the house a little bit more organized with 2 boys running around. So,
oh, I totally hear you on that one.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone that has joined us. If you have any questions with us here, you can contact me at Diane, DIANE, at hartfordfinancialgroup.com. And Nettie put her email address in the chat box. So I hope you all have a great day. Sorry we ran a few minutes over, but I think it was totally worth it. And I thank you all for being with us today. Bye-bye.